welcome to Can Be Crafty Shop. I'm Carrie Causey, and today I'm introducing to you the newest product in my Etsy shop, the 4-inch hand loom. So let me show you all the parts, and then we'll get going on how to set it up and how to use it. So the main part of the loom is the loom itself. We've got inches at the top and the left side, and we have centimeters at the bottom and the right side. There are 6 wraps per inch, but you use both the top and the bottom threads, so that translates to 12. So you have this frame, you've got a comb for pushing everything down where it belongs, and it's got inches, and then a little farther down it's got centimeters. It's 3 inches and 7.5 centimeters, so you can measure your work as you go and see what you've got. You have a 6-inch blunt weaving needle, so it's blunted at the end so that it won't grab your yarn. It's pretty smooth. And you've got a standard finishing needle, and then you've got my cute little Can Be Crafty needle minder, because this is not knitting and crochet needles. You don't just put them down all the time. You do put them down all the time, and you don't want them rolling away. So this comes in the kit. So this can sit on your little coffee table beside your chair or wherever you need it to be. I don't know if I'd throw it in a bag this way, but this will keep them from rolling off and keep you from sitting on it. All right, let's get started. I have a remnant of a ball of Barocco Vintage Chunky in the colorway Pumpkin. And so you can make, I guess I should say what this is mostly for. So it goes up to 4 inches wide. In reality, by the time you've got done weaving, it pulls in to like about a 1/4 inch on each side, 3.5 or so. If you get really, really good, the chunkier the yarn you use, the wider you can get, because you're less likely to pull the strands too close together. But you can go up to 4 inches or approximately 10 centimeters. And then on the sides, it does go down to 6. So you can go up to 6, oh, there we go, up to 6 inches in length. So you could do a wide piece if you needed. I envisioned this making 4x4-ish coasters, and then the extra inch at the top and bottom are so you still have room to do your weaving. Because you don't want to be weaving right up to the end. You want to leave room for tassels and things like that. So in this video, I'll be showing you how to make a roughly 4x4-inch coaster, and then how to finish the edges leaving tassels. So I am not a professional weaver. I am a knitter mostly, and a crocheter a little bit, and not a professional weaver. This seemed to be an opening that something like this could fill in my Etsy shop, and so I'm making it, and anyone can weave a basic coaster. You don't need to have any skill. You don't need to be a knitter or a crocheter. So here we go with a basic coaster. Anyone who knows anything about weaving will do it better than me, but here we go for a regular non-weaver. So I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to attach it. All 4 corners have a hole, so you can technically start anywhere you want. I'm going to tie this around a corner. Any old corner. I like the top just because it doesn't have to be overly tight or anything. Just tie it on there. And then I'm going to start wrapping by going up into the first notch here. So this little bit doesn't really count, and it'll cut, and this extra length will go into the tassels when we're done and get trimmed off. And then we're just going to wrap the loom. This is the warp, I believe. And I'm using some, but not too much tension, because remember, the top and bottom are going to be pulled together. We're going to be weaving both of them, so they'll flatten out, like I said, from 6 down to 12. So it can actually be somewhat snug. But if you notice that your wrapping is at all bowing, if you're wrapping it so tight that the wood starts to warp, that's going to be too tight, and you're going to want to do that over again. All right, I've reached the bottom here, and just like I did at the top, I'm gonna come through the last tooth, and then I wanna tie it off right here. So I'm gonna cut my yarn, leaving enough tail to work with, and then give it a quick tie off. Can be helpful because you're tying right down to the wood. There's not really room for your hands to work at all. So I'm going to use my handy dandy finishing needle and thread that on real quick so that I can actually tie this knot. So a note on yarn weights, you can use any weight yarn to weave a coaster. But it will, which yarn you choose will change some things about your coaster. This one is woven in Cascade 128, which is basically a double of their 220, and it is definitely a chunky, even a bulky yarn, heavier. So you can see here, it's just a 2-ply. You can see how thick and fluffy that is. Compared here to the vintage chunky, like it's just so much larger. It is really puffy, and it makes a very nice, thick, heavy coaster. This one I would think would be enough to insulate a hot coffee cup from a wooden table and keep it from making a heat ring. I'm not sure. Obviously this is a thin woven. This isn't thick like a slate coaster or anything. So your mileage may vary. Do your own independent research. Woo, my ends haven't gone in yet. Check everything out on your own table before you go using it. But here is my mug rug made out of vintage Cascade 128. And then this one is done in Remix. I think that's also Barocco. And it's a regular worsted weight. So you can see it came out a little bit smaller. Length won't have anything to do with it, but you can see that it came out quite a bit smaller because the fatter the warp, the more it will keep itself spread out and resist pulling in. You can resist pulling in on thinner ones, you just have to be more careful about it. And this one I just did in a couple of stripes of Remix. It's a cotton linen acrylic blend. I forgot, the 128 is solid superwash wool. This one is a cotton linen blend, and it's also very lovely, but a finer gauge and a little bit narrower because I'm not a weaver and I did not successfully keep it almost 4 inches wide. This one is done, I do not remember what yarn this is. This was a leftover remnant of a sock yarn from my stash. So this one is very, very thin. This one I think would definitely not be sufficient to insulate from a hot coffee mug. This might be more keep the water ring off the table kind of a thing, or just to be beautiful. Isn't that? I loved the socks I made out of this. Anyway, this isn't what you're here for. I managed to make my sock weight one about the same width as my worsted weight one. I'm getting better at not pulling in my edges. But you can use any yarn you like to make your coasters. All right, so there's those. We'll put those aside. This one is a chunky weight, but it's sort of like an Aran heavy worsted. It's still, it's not overly puffy. So you want to take as much yarn as you feel like you can work with. I usually go from my fingertip across my chest to my shoulder on this side, which gives me like 3-ish feet. And in this weight, I find that I'll need approximately 4 strands that length to do a 4-inch coaster. So about 1 inch per 3 feet-ish is what I get on this thicker, like, mid-sized yarn. Down here on the sock yarn, of course, there's so many more rows. I needed many more pieces than that. So I'm gonna stretch out a piece here about 3 feet long. Here's my piece. We'll get that woven in. Oh, that end is icky. Get our needle threaded up here for weaving. All right, here we go. I'm going to start, I've got 6 inches of height here. I only want a 4-inch coaster, so I'm going to start about an inch up. So I'll start at the 5 here. There's a witness mark on each side at the inch, and then at the same thing over here. So even if you're going by centimeters, you can still use the witness marks on the side to line yourself up and keep your rows straight. So if you've ever done one of those pot holder looms with the little loops or any amount of weaving ever, this is exactly the same. You're just gonna go up, down, until you get across. In the first half or so, you can use your right hand to tip the needle up and down, but the farther over you get away from your hand and the more strands you've got, it becomes harder. And so eventually I end up using my left hand to push either the needle up and down, like with the back of with my finger here, or I use my thumb and my fingers to actually move the threads up and down, the yarns, the warp. Either way, both ways, I end up sort of doing a combination of both. If I feel like I need to move the needle, I move the needle, and if I feel like I need to move the yarn or the back of the needle this way, I do. All right, so I am highly right-handed, which means I want to do every single thing with my right hand. Luckily, this is small, so I just turn it over so I can pull through with my right hand. All right, you want to leave a 4 to 6 inch tail at the end, because when you go to weave your ends in, you'll want to thread it onto your finishing needle so that you can tuck in on the back. So leave enough that you can thread and then sew. So there's my 4 to 6 inches. And I'm just going to line this up nice and straight with my witness marks on the side. All right, one cool thing about this loom, since we've wrapped round and round, half of the strands are above the loom and the other half are on the back, right? So if you wove one direction, that means when you go back the other direction, the top ones will need to be on the top, the bottom ones will need to be on the back, and you can actually just slide your needle through the trench that it makes at the opposite end. So one way you have to weave, and the other way you can just slip it in and be done. So that's actually pretty cool. I like to, once I've done my weaving, I like to slide my needle, it reaches side to side, all the way up, and that gives you the chance to check your weaving and make sure that you haven't missed any. Again, I'm very right-handed, so I turn it over so I can pull through with my right hand. Now here are a couple of tricks to keeping your sides as even as possible and to allow you to be consistent by doing the same thing every time. So when I go to pull through, I'm going to use my left hand because this is the side we're pulling from. I'm going to hold the tail with this very last warp yarn and hold on to the frame. So I'm just going to pinch it right here. Okay. Then when I pull through, I'm going to go up at like a 45 or so, and I'm going to pull tight because I'm holding it here to keep it from going too tight. So I'm holding here, I'm going to pull up. See there? Nice and straight. You can tug because you're supporting it down here on the left. Now when you check, you want to make sure that you have pulled it and it has actually touched the warp. It's deviated ever so slightly. We'll fix that. But it should only barely be tucked in. But what you do want is for the yarn to be actually touching this all the way. You don't want there to be like a pocket. Okay, so we've done our pull up. Keep holding. Pull this down into a little bit of an arch. And you'll find your favorite like gap here. I find about an inch to be what I need. Maybe it depends on your yarn, maybe it depends on your tension, maybe it depends how hard you pulled, but give yourself about an inch and see how that works out and see how that works for you. And then I'm going to grab both of the edge warps, left and right, and just give a little tug to widen that out. And you saw that tucked it just a tad. Now go for your comb, and you can use the back of the comb and push down in the middle to bring this down before patting the whole thing flat. Now what the purpose of the arch and the purpose of this pulling down is, this is going to give you slack in this piece you've just woven. When you pull and make the arch, all of that is slack, right? Because it needs to be straight across, but we have extra length by letting it go up. And when you tack it in the middle first, you distribute it so that half the slack will be on this side of center and half the slack will be on this side of center, so that when you go to pat it down, What's on the left will go leftward, and what's on the right will go rightward. Again, this does take a little bit of practice. Your first coaster will probably not be the most beautiful thing you ever made as you practice and learn. There's a very, very slight learning curve. It's nothing like knitting or crochet. Within 2 or 3 rows, or maybe even 1 coaster, you'll be an expert and you'll be fine. And if it didn't take, like right here in the middle, I've got a little too much slack. It didn't go to the sides like I wanted, so I can give it another tug and redistribute that slack. Also, the very first like 3 to 4 rows are a little squirrely just because you're setting the straight and you're setting the tension for the rest of the coaster. So you might have to fiddle with your first rows more than other rows. I've still got a little slack. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but I can see I've got too much slack in the middle. So I'm just gonna tighten that up a bit. As long as you have enough slack at the wrapped end, you can fiddle this end later because you're gonna wrap that end next. So you're gonna set how close together your warp threads are, and you're gonna set how tightly packed you plan to pack your weaving. So there's my witness at the 5, my other one over here, which is straight across. No matter what the measurement is, it's straight. All right, so let's do another weaving. I'll do 3 or 4 here so we can get a little bit of a rhythm, and then I'll fast forward to the end to sew the edge. So here we are. If you weave farther away from your work down here, if you weave up here, you'll have a much easier time doing the weaving. Once you get a full coaster and there's not much space left, it gets a little on the tight side. So if your yarn is up, make sure you start out by going under, and then you just weave it around. I end up finding, once I get into a rhythm, that my right hand mostly just pushes forward, and it really is my left hand that does the majority of the weaving and pushing of the needle. All right, here we go. I like to do everything with my right hand. So we'll flip it over. I'm gonna hold both the end warp thread and the weaving thread, get my tail out of the way, and I'm just going to hold them both with the frame here. Pull it to about a 45, check, that's way too loose. I need to make sure that it's actually a 45 up from this bottom one, so it's touching completely. I think that might be a little too tight, so I'm going to back it off a touch. All right, still holding. I'm going to bring it down into that arch, give it a pull, make sure the ends get as much slack as they need. I always like to comb towards myself as well. So here we go. Go in the middle, press that down. You can even press from the middle towards the outside if you really want to make sure that the slack, if you're having trouble with your slack, you can try pressing from the middle to the outside like that. Ooh, look at nice and even, touching all the way. We will finish this little bit where the end comes out when we work on the edges. That is a perfect wrap. All right, we'll do one more. And again, this is the easy way. It's time for these top threads to be on top. So I'm going to come down here and slide it through. Slide it up. I think I forgot to do that last time. Check to make sure the weave is good. Hold the end of the thread up about at a 45. I feel like I deflected too much, so I'll back it off a tad. All right, bring it down to the arch. Give it a little smish. Whoops. Bring down that middle, and I'm going to go from the middle towards the outside just to make sure the slack goes the direction I want it to go. There we go. So when you're weaving, like with knitting or crochet, the point is not to get it so tight that you can't see light. Like, the point is to make it even and smooth. That is even and smooth. I don't know if you could see. I can see light through it. I would want to sit there and keep beating it and keep combing it and keep squishing it until that's not necessary. This is weaving. It's got some texture, but it's nice and even and the ends are square. So I'm gonna finish this from 5 inches up to 1, and that's gonna be 4 inches of length. I'm maintaining close to 4 inches of width. There's a ruler on the back of the comb, and I could only get it to 3 inches because it had to be a small enough comb. But you can see what warp you're on and then lay it on again. I am right at 4 inches wide. So if I can maintain this the whole way up, we'll get a 4x4 coaster right on. So I will see you once I have filled this up to the 1 inch mark, and we'll sew the edges. Okay, I forgot. We need to stop in the middle and tell you how to join yarns. So I'm just going to show you what I do with that. And I'm not going to double thread with the next strand because sometimes if your yarn is too bulky or it's just too fiddly to get it in there, you don't have to do it that way. So I'm going to pre-weave my needle and then thread it with this too short end. Please excuse me while I dampen the threads. Okay, and then I've woven it all the way through, and so I'm going to go ahead and protect my edge and pull it through. And there's my tail just hanging out in the middle up there. And I'm going to go ahead and just give it a tug and tamp it down just as if it went all the way through. So there's my little end there. And I'm going to go ahead and reach in from the back and pull it to the back so that I have enough of a tuft in the back that it's not going to pop through to the surface. So there's my little tuft on the back there. Okay, so now I'll cut my next piece. And from the same direction, so here's my last wrap, and there's the tail that goes down. From the same direction on the same weave. So unlike usually, my needle is going to match what I've done before because I want my new thread and my old thread to be on the same track. So I'm going to go ahead and come in. And because it's not tied to anything, I'll just sort of have to make it stay down here in the corner. And this time I'm going to make sure and leave myself enough tail because I'm always going to pull the extra through to the back in a minute. So that's fine. Go ahead and arch it down, give a little tug. Once you get your tension more even, I find I don't need to tap the middle like I did when I first started out. I figured out how to leave enough tension just by pressing it down straight. All right, so once that's nice and straightly even, I'm just going to take my new tail, which is currently here, and also pop it through from the back. So this might be easier from the front or from the back, however you need. You might need the long needle or the short needle. Just use whatever tools you've got. There it goes. Pulling it through to the back. So again, they're following the same weave, the old tail and the new tail. And there's all my little ends on the back, which we will deal with later. All right. I'm up to about 3 inches. My edges are staying reasonably straight, so I've got about another inch to go before I'm done. Here we are at the end. I managed to keep my edges really nice and straight. It's about 3 7/8 inch wide, which is about as good as you can get. And I've got from the 5-inch mark up to the 1-inch mark, and we'll squinch the ends in a little bit at the end as we sew them together, but that's going to basically be a 4-inch coaster, and little inconsistencies in the weave will come out in the blocking. Blocking is when you gently stretch the coaster into a square while it's wet and you let it dry that way, and a lot of these little tiny bumps and things that you can't prevent will come out in the blocking. So let's sew the edge. I will try to zoom in on this part in the video so that you can really see what I'm doing. So we're going to finish the end. You need about another 3-foot piece to do the weaving and have enough left over that you don't risk running out. So I cut myself a whole new piece here. You've got your finishing needle along with your weaving needle. It's a little bit chunkier. So if you're working on super fine, like if you're using sock yarn or something, you may still want to use your thinner, longer weaving needle. You might want to anyway, I don't know. Anyway, there they are. So I'm going to thread up my needle with my new 3-foot piece here. It's got a bigger eye on it too. All right, let's get started. So this hunk here is our last weaving piece. I'm going to cut it down just to a few inches so that's not in the way. And this bit that's left, we're just going to let it come up and it's going to stay in with our ends here. So the finish that I'm going to show in this video is called the hem stitch, and it's the very most basic stitch that there is for, we're basically going to make tiny little wraps around 2 warp threads at a time, and we're going to tie the threads down into the fabric. For this weight, for the chunky and the worsted weight, you can go down just 2 rows. I found on the sock weight one, it's so thin and delicate. I went down 2 rows and it does not feel secure, so I would go down 3 rows if you're using a lightweight yarn. But anyway, so here we go. I'm going to use my new yarn and I'm going to come up from the back. I'll stretch this out to get out of the way, and we're going to be down just 2 rows. So here I'm going to come in 2, 1, 2. I'm going to come down 2. So there's under 1 thread and there's under a 2nd thread right there. So you can see that I'm 2 down and 2 in. I'm going to come up from the back to start my yarn here. And I'm going to leave myself about a 4 or 6 inch tail, because then we will just work this tail into our tufted ends here. Okay, so on this end one, we're just going to go around the 2, and at the end here it's going to be a little finagly because we've got so many loose ends sticking out. Once you get in, it'll be a little easier. So there's our tail, and leave our tail not tied around, just coming out the end there. There we are. So we just went around, and here we are around. See there? Okay. And our tail back here is keeping it from being tight, but we'll be able to tighten up all the tails at the end. All right. So now we're going to go around again and come up in that 2 over, 2 down position. So we're going to come back up where this yarn is coming out, which is only fiddly here at the end. Once we get away from the end, everything will be better. All right. Hold our ends out of the way. Now you do not need to tie a knot here. If you came over your wrap, you would end up tying a knot. We don't want a knot, so we'll get this up out of the way. It's just a wrap. I'm going to pull all the way through. So here it is coming around, and it's just going to tie a nice neat wrap and tug down so that the wrap snugs itself down into the fabric. And the reason this is loose is because I've got the tail back here and the tail out here to the side. Tail, 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 tail. We'll jiggle those. All right, now we're away from the end. We've done our first one. The rest will be easier to see. Let's tuck that down out of the way. All right, now you have secured the first two, so we'll move on to the second two. So here's our pattern. You go around the second two and pull. Of course, your edges, your yarn will always be getting caught on the corners of the loom. That's just the way it is. Okay, so when you do this one and pull tight, it's pulling this bit up. All right. After you've gone around once, you go into the same one again as if you're going around these two, but you're going to come up underneath in that 2 down position. So here's our 2, and here's down 1, and here's down 2. So that's where we're going to come up. So we're going to go around the 2, down, and up. And the number 2 slot down here. Okay, and again, we're not trying to tie a knot, so we'll keep all the extra length out of the way. You can see when we draw it up, we've just gone around these two, and then you pull down to tighten this wrap and attach it to the first 2 rows. Again, this end one is still slightly wonky because it's loose. We'll take care of those ends when we tighten it up at the end. Okay, so sometimes I like the longer one because the frame can interfere with my fingers getting in here. So we'll try another one and we'll see if the longer one might be easier after that. So go around the 2, just a regular pull, and that goes up with this piece. Pull it down tightly, up out of the way, in the same place again, and then out, 2 down and 2 over. And that gives the wrap. You pull down snugly. So we tie the end 2 to the fabric that's down 2 rows. Around 2 and pull. Give it a snug. Around the same 2 again, this tail out of the way, around the same 2 again, and down 2. Not tying a knot, just, oh, that's a nice one right there. Just making a loop, pulling down snug. All right, when you get to the end, there'll be an odd number, so I just take all 3. So here's my last one. I'm down 2 rows from my last pull through. Make sure you're always pulling down to snug that wrap. So I'm going to go around the last 3 here. And pull tight. Oh, there's my tail. And then you can't go down and over the same number because you'd be off the edge. So we're going to go back down in, tail up out of the way. And I'm just going to go over and leave that last one so that I'm still coming up inside there. Okay, so there's my last wrap, and I'm down here. So now I'm just going to come up and I'm going to weave under the first, just the last little weave I have there, and then also up into the wrap I just made. Whoops. This would be a little easier if I wasn't trying to show it to the camera. So that when I pull my tail, the wrap will tighten onto the tail itself. The tighter you pull, the more secure the tail will be stuck in its own wrap. So there's that end finished. So I'll cut this off even with where the rest of these wraps are going to be. We don't remove it from the loom until the very, very end. Okay, now we have to come back to our initial, here's our weaving tail, right? This was our last one that went across. So we'll thread him on. And the whole point here is just to anchor it in the weaving that already exists and then put the tail out through what's going to be the tassels. So however that looks like it's going to work out for you, that's probably what you should do. So for this one, I'm on the top here, so let's wrap it around to the back. Let's look and see how it's going to look. Oh, that's going to look great. All right, let's go on the back here. Here's what the back of your stitch looks like, your hem stitch. So let's see, I've got some crosses here. I think I'll go up into one of these weaves and down here, and then up out through the wrap. So I want to get under this cross piece. I also want to get up into the wrap that goes all the way around. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to pull that tail up there gently but firmly. That pulls the knot nice and tight. We'll trim him to the length of our wraps. And then here was the tail from when we started the bind off, the hem stitch. Again, there's plenty of tail here to weave it in. Now let's see, where can this one go? I already put an extra tail through this side, so let's go into the next one here. I want to go up one of these actual weaving stitches. Go, and then I'm going to go under the cross stitch here. There we go, but I also want to go into the wrap. There we go. So all these ends are just find yourself a good tight knot and go up. Now you see that because I've done these 2 in a row, they have separated this a little bit. So we're going to slide these knots back down on the front. So we're going to make it tight, but try not to pull away too much. All right, so all of these ends have been encased in the knots, and there you can see the pull away a little bit. So now to finish this, I just come down with my nail, because remember, all of these wraps were pulled towards the fabric, but the more you work, the more you pull it away. So I'm just going to slide down this whole row to compact it a little bit and make sure it's really well down and not pulling these last 2 rows away from the fabric by the knotting. So we're just going to even it up down here. And again, when we block it, when we wet it and then pin it into a square, a lot of this, everything is going to get very soft and will even out the texture and the tension. As we say in knitting and crochet, blocking covers a multitude of sins. So you end up with this nice little row of knots, and see this very slight arch? That'll come out in the blocking, don't worry about that. You don't have to be perfect to have it look pretty perfect when we get done with blocking. All right, so I've finished this end with the hem stitch. So now I'll turn it around and do all the same things down here. All right, I've almost finished the hem stitch on my very first edge. And I just wanted to show you something real quick. I'm down to my last 3 that I'll put in a bundle. And where I very first started, there was a little bit of pull in, and this end looks like it might end up being kind of pointy. You can hold on to your tails and just scoot those in a little bit when you go to do this wrap and pull in just a bit. Oops, I'm stuck on my corner here. You can pull in just a bit with your very first one and slide those guys in. Just to help with that slightly. Pull down for tight, pull in for slide, and there we go. And a little bit of that will come out with the blocking too. So anchor it here. You know what, I'm gonna go across, I'm gonna anchor it over here because this tail is gonna go out with this bundle. So I want this tail to go out with that bundle. Actually, no, I'll put this one across, that'll be easier. It doesn't really matter where you go with your tails. You can just decide what looks best to you at the time. And we're done. Hem stitching. All of our long ends have been fed under a wrap or two, a weave or two, and then up through where the tassels will be. We've got our little joins poking out the back there. And we're ready to go. So you want to take a pair of small, very sharp scissors, and we'll snip our ties where we tied our original warp on to the frame. There they are. And then you're just going to go in and cut up at the top. This is another reason why you don't want to weave super close to the edges, because we need to have enough room to cut off and be able to make even tassels. We will want to trim them after we've cut it off the loom, because they won't be very neat coming off this way. Okay, there's one end. And of course this end will be much easier. Whoops, now I have to hold it up for the camera though. That part isn't easier. All right, so here we have our very first coaster. That is pretty good as it is. This one probably wouldn't need, it doesn't have to be blocked. Everything always looks better when it's blocked. Everything will be more relaxed. The stitches will be more even. That's pretty darn good. That might be the best coaster I've made on my loom so far. There they are. All right, next step is blocking. All right, time for blocking. I will explain everything to you as our coaster soaks. So I'm not gonna trim any of our ends yet. I'm not gonna trim the back yet. We're just gonna put it into a bowl of lukewarm, tepid water and let it soak for a few minutes. We wanna let it get all the way wet. When blocking, it's always a good idea to check your yarn for washing instructions, but for this kind of a project, it doesn't really matter. All yarn can get wet. Even 100% wool, even silk, even anything, it can all get wet. The label will tell you whether you can wash it in the washing machine or not, or whether you can put it in the dryer. Neither of those apply here. This is a hand wash product, particularly because of the way we hem stitched the edge. Those are all looped and they're lightly tied-ish, but they're not secure enough to go through the washing machine. So you will always want to wash these coasters by hand. And this weave is so loose that all the jerking of a washing machine would be likely to stretch it out anyhow. So whatever kind of yarn you have will be able to be put into lukewarm, tepid water and soaked. So we'll soak that for a few minutes and I'll tell you what I have. I have my coaster and I have lukewarm water. Because I'm a knitter and I do a lot of other things, I have an official blocking mat. It's one of those, it's a foam mat, and I have T-pins. You do not have to have this. If you have one of those play mats that goes on the floor of a kid's play place, that's basically this same foamy stuff, that works. I used that for like 10 years before I finally got these smaller ones that could go on my table. If you just have a box and you want to cut out a piece of cardboard, we're not pulling on it very hard. So you can just use a piece of cardboard and some sewing pins and pin it out. It doesn't really take all that much, but I have these and so I'm going to use it. So after it soaks, we're going to roll it in a towel real quick to remove as much of the extra as we can. When you're wondering if it's soaked enough, I don't know if you're going to be able to see in there with the light and the reflection. I still see tiny little bubbles coming up off the piece. That means there's still air down in there. So it needs to soak at least 5 minutes, maybe closer to 10. You can by gently squeezing it, and that will help the water to get into the fibers and squeeze out the extra air bubbles. But you do want to be gentle. This is not a washcloth that you can throw in the washer and dryer and abuse and just have it all come out all right in the end. This is a woven project that we have been very careful with and is going to be beautiful, but should not be abused. All right, our piece is soaked and we are ready to do some blocking. And it's not actually a very big deal, especially on a very small piece like this. So we're going to gently squeeze out extra water. Get rid of that. And lay it out on a towel. Roll it up. Give it a squeeze. There's no need to let evaporation do all the work and take a really long time when we could remove part of the water before we even start. Okay. There we go. Crinkly, wrinkly mess. So, all that blocking is pinning out your piece to what you would like it to be. Now, with these coasters, remember how when we did the hem stitch, we looped around these tassely edges and we pulled in. There's no real knots. And remember that the knots, the little loops that we did make, slide up and down the tassel. That means if we pull this way, we can actually slide those knots back out. So we will not pull this way almost at all. Like we'll pin the two sides nice and straight and even. And if something is uneven, we'll give it a little tug. That's it. But we can pull this way because the yarns are all attached to each other as we wove. Maybe it will be easier if I orient it the same direction as when we were weaving it. Yes, we will not pull up and down the way that the knots could slide, but we can pull it sideways, which is the way that our edges tuck in, and so we can pull those back out. So with a blocking mat, you've got 1-inch grid marks on there, which is super awesome for doing stuff like this. Let's see what we have here on our width. Here's if I put a corner there, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can pull it out to 4 inches, and that will easily stretch that way. Let's see what we have on length. 1, 2, 3, almost 4. That will probably be a little too much of a pull. If we pull this ridge all the way down to the inch mark, that will be a little much. So I'm going to pin this top one out, and then we'll just pull it till it's just taut and then pin it straight wherever that corner happens to be. So we're going to grab the entire row here. I'm not going to pin just this knot because that will encourage it to slide. So I'm going to put my pin inside this row right at the corner of this one. If you do not know anything about blocking, here's just some very quick tips. You will usually try for the corners first, and then halfway on the sides, and then halfway between those halfways until it's evenly pinned out. So I'm going to go out here. I'm going to stretch it to this corner. There, that's just a little bit of a stretch. I'm actually going to put my pin in the middle of this row of knots because it's good and that's pretty stable with all that tightening. All right, and then we'll go down to this bottom one here. And again, we don't want to pull with the knots and cause them to slide very much. So I'm just going to stretch it down just enough so that this edge straightens for us. So it looks like I'm about 1/4 inch up, so that I'll make it the same on the other side. Out to the 4, pulling this way is good because there's no knots to slide off. You can pull it all the way out to the line, and then until it's about 1/4 inch up from the next line, and you can check with your tassels. All right, so you can see it's got a bow here and a bow here. That's fine. Adding all the extra pins will even that out. You're kind of annoying in the tin. Let's pull them out here. So I'll go in the middle, and I can't really see for the part the reeds until I can see where I'm pinning. But mostly it's just, you just need it to be visually straight. So there's the middle there. This one's also arched up, so I'm going to grab and go there. And I'm just going to keep dividing each one in half until my ends are nice and stable. The more pins you add, the less each one has tension on it because the tension is distributed along all the pins. So it won't actually be pulling on your piece too badly once you've got a pin every 1/4 inch or so. And you can see this isn't taking very much time. And I'm not being ultra precise. We're just getting some pins in to straighten the ends. Just give them a little bit of a tug. until the line looks straight. About every other knot is sufficient. That's plenty to make it straight, and it doesn't have little bows in it, right? Just very small little tugs lengthwise, pulling with the knots. And you will be amazed, actually, if you haven't blocked before and you're wondering what all this is about. Isn't it all going to just spring back when you unpin it? The answer is no if you are using natural fibers. Acrylic, if you have used 100% acrylic, Red Heart, or cheap Hobby Lobby yarn, then blocking will probably not help you very much. I did forget to mention that at the beginning. But if you are using any natural fibers or a significant blend, so this vintage is 50% wool and 50% acrylic, that will totally block. If it was 100% acrylic, blocking wouldn't really help and you wouldn't need to do all this. Whatever you get when you're done weaving is what you get, and you can't really adjust it, but this is adjusting. With natural fibers, either wool or cotton, linen, all natural fibers will benefit from blocking. All right. Oh, there goes my dog. Must be the Amazon guy. All right, so we've got the top and bottom nice and even and straight, and we can see that the edge is pulled in ever so slightly, and that actually is good, which means that we will have somewhere to stretch it to really even up those edges. So again, we're just gonna do the middle. We're just gonna stretch it out. I need to use my right hand. Remember how I said I'm really right-handed? I can do basically nothing with my left hand. And we'll divide this in half. If it looks like you're stretching it out by pulling the very edge single warp, go ahead and pull two. It's fine. It's whatever it looks like when you're done pinning it is what it's going to look like when you unblock it. And so if you stretch it out by pinning it one way and it looks better by pinning it a slightly different way, then you do that. Okay, there we go. And I'm going in at an angle here. And that's all that side needs. Maybe one more here. In fact, I think this corner one maybe needs to come out a tad more. Yeah, you can pin and repin. This will take a while to dry. So you can look at it and see if you like it and repin it a few times. It's all good. There's no stress to this blocking part. Blocking might sound big and scary. I don't know, maybe it doesn't to you. I always thought blocking was going to be big and scary, and then I finally did it and I'm like, wait, you mean you just stick pins in it till it looks good? Yes, that's what you do. Since I'm very right-handed, I've got to turn it around to do the other side very well. So we've got this loop here, and I did grab one thread, and I don't think that's good for my edge. I'm going to go back and grab two. Oh, that looks better already. And it will look stretched out when you start, and you only have one pin in. And then the more pins you add, the more even it will be. You can see already, I don't know if you can tell in the video, the weave is not nearly as lumpy and bumpy and uneven as it was when I wove it. Getting wet made all of the fibers relax into place. They puffed up to fill the gaps that they left. The parts that were slightly stretched too much and a little bit thinner because they were too tight, those eased out. Wetting and blocking really, really, really improves literally every single thing you've ever done. Even if you had none of this at all, and you just laid it flat and smoothed it and tugged it by hand and smoothed it into place, it would look better after that than if you hadn't done it at all. So even if you do not want to do all these pins and you don't even have a piece of cardboard and you don't even have sewing pins, at least soak it, roll it, and then smooth it to the best of your ability, and it will look so much better than it did without. All right, I'm done. This took what, 5 minutes? Not even. And then just because I'm going to use my comb and pull these out here. And I'm actually going to trim them now while it's wet. It's kind of like cutting wet hair. They'll be straighter and smoother and easier while they're wet than when they get fluffy. So I'm going to comb them all out straight. Nice thing about having this blocking board is that you have cutting lines. So this one, this was at the top and it's right on the line. So if I want 1-inch tassels, I can cut right on the line. This one, this other end, we couldn't quite stretch it to the 4. And so it's about a 1/4 inch shy of the line. So to get 1-inch tassels, I'll cut about a 1/4 inch shy of the line. So very sharp scissors is helpful for this, just so you don't end up fraying the little edges. All right, so I'm a 1/4 inch in, so I'm a 1/4 inch in. So I'm just gonna go right along, taking just a little at a time. And you can go back and trim them. If you miss a piece, that's all right. We're just getting an initial trim here. You can try to keep an eye on your line from the top. Going down, and of course these bits where we tied and left our ends all get taken care of in the tassels. There's that end. Whoops, missed that one. And they will look a little bit better once they are dry and have fluffed up a little. You pull them out, make sure they're mostly even, and you can do, you can go back and snip off extra little fuzzies once they're dried and it's far away from the board. All right, there's that side. And then this one, I pinned it at the line, and so I can cut it right at the line. If you have bigger sewing scissors that are really good and sharp, that might be easier. I don't know. I've always just used my little ones because I can be precise and just cut, 1 or 2 threads at a time with them. So you do whatever works best for you. Also, using thread scissors to cut yarn will dull the thread scissors pretty fast, just so you know. Okay. Oops, I didn't quite get all of those. Let's go back. All right. All right, that got it mostly. All right, now we let it dry. If you put a little table fan right on it, it'll probably be dry in just a few hours. But if you don't care, just go set this away on a counter somewhere and just come back later and check on it. So next thing you see, we will unpin it, and you will be able to see for yourself how it stays exactly as square as you pinned it. The first time I blocked it, it was like magic. I couldn't believe it was true, that it still looked as good as it did when I unpinned it as it did when I put it down. Here we go. All right, our coaster is dry. So let's unpin it and we'll see how it stays. Just like that, still perfectly square, beautifully flat. All the little inconsistencies have evened out. It holds itself beautifully flat, very smooth and nice straight edges. Look at that. So I've already put away my good sharp scissors. But for the backs, all we're gonna do is trim these down until there's just a little bit of a tuft sticking out so that when they move and shift, the tails will still stay on the back side. I've had a few other ideas I wanted to add. I might make more videos for these later, but for the moment, if you wanna do stripes like this, I wove a row over and back of one color and then left it hanging and wove 2 of another color, and then I just rethreaded the first one and brought it down the side. You can still go over and then under so that the side kind of has its own little weave. It makes this little bit of a little swoopy around the side here, so you don't have to cut and do all of these as their own separate strands. Just leave it hanging and weave with the other one and then carry it down. So that works pretty well for that. For this one, I wrapped half my warp with the light color, and then I start the next one and just hold the tail, leaving lots of end, and wrap this other one, and then tied these two together right at the top here. So I have my two long ends, one of each color. I tied them together and left the knot here. And then when you go to trim your tassels, your knot of course falls off. So then I wove half of it in brown and then switched into the other half in light. And that's how I got this. Don't look too closely at this 4 pattern. It's not super consistent. I was still working on my edges and my weaving. This section's tighter, this section's looser. It's still a great coaster. Don't expect your very first coaster to be, ultra perfect. It's a learning curve. There's a lot to learn and a lot to do, a lot of things to pay attention to. But here we are with lovely coasters. And that's it. Enjoy making your coasters, and I hope this has been very helpful for you learning how to use your 4-inch loom.